are aspects of the same essence, suchness. For this reason, it is said in a sutra that all sentient beings intrinsically abide in eternity and are entered into nirvana. The state of enlightenment is not something that is to be acquired by practice or to be created. In the end, it is unobtainable, for it is given from the beginning. Also, it has no corporeal aspect that can be perceived as such. Any corporeal aspects, such as the marks of the Buddha, that are visible are magic-like products of suchness manifested in accordance with the mentality of men in defilement. It is not, however, that these corporeal aspects which result from the suprarational functions of wisdom are of the nature of non-emptiness, substantial, for wisdom has no aspects that can be perceived.
Non-identity. Just as various pieces of pottery differ from each other, so differences exist between the state of enlightenment and that of non-enlightenment, and between the magic-like manifestations of suchness manifested in accordance with the mentality of men in defilement, and those of men of ignorance who are defiled, i.e., blinded, as to the essential nature of suchness. 2. The cause and conditions of man's being in samsara. That a man is in samsara results from the fact that his mind and consciousness develop on the ground of the storehouse consciousness. This means that because of the aspect of non-enlightenment of the storehouse consciousness, he is said to be in possession of ignorance, and thus is bound to remain in samsara.
A. Mind. The mentality which emerges in the state of non-enlightenment, which incorrectly perceives and reproduces the world of objects and, conceiving that the reproduced world of objects is real, continues to develop deluded thoughts, is what we define as mind. The mind has 5 different names. The first is called the activating mind, for, without being aware of it, it breaks the equilibrium of mind by the force of ignorance. The second is called the evolving mind, for it emerges contingent upon the agitated mind as the subject that perceives incorrectly. The third is called the reproducing mind, for it reproduces the entire world of objects as a bright mirror reproduces all material images. When confronted with the objects of the 5 senses, it reproduces them at once. It arises spontaneously at all times and exists forever reproducing the world of objects in front of the subject. The fourth is called the analytical mind, for it differentiates what is defiled and what is undefiled. The fifth is called the continuing mind, for it is united with deluded thoughts and continues uninterrupted. It retains the entire karma, good and bad, accumulated in the immeasurable lives of the past, and does not permit any loss. It is also capable of bringing the results of the pain, pleasure, etc., of the present and the future to maturity. In doing so, it makes no mistakes. It can cause one to recollect suddenly the things of the present and the past and to have sudden and unexpected fantasies of the things to come. The triple world, therefore, is unreal and is of mind only.
Apart from it there are no objects of the 5 senses and of the mind. What does this mean? Since all things are, without exception, developed from the mind and produced under the condition of deluded thoughts, all differentiations are no other than the differentiations of one's mind itself. Yet the mind cannot perceive the mind itself. The mind has no marks of its own that can be ascertained as a substantial entity as such. It should be understood that the conception of the entire world of objects can be held only on the basis of man's deluded mind of ignorance. All things, therefore, are just like the images in a mirror which are devoid of any objectivity that one can get hold of. They are of the mind only and are unreal. When the deluded mind comes into being, then various conceptions come to be, and when the deluded mind ceases to be, then these various conceptions cease to be. B. Consciousness. What is called consciousness is the continuing mind. Because of their deep-rooted attachment, ordinary men imagine that I and mine are real and cling to them in their illusions. As soon as objects are presented, this consciousness rests on them and discriminates the objects of the 5 senses and of the mind. This is called Vijnana, i.e., the differentiating consciousness, or the separating consciousness. The propensity for discrimination of this consciousness will be intensified by both the intellectual defilement of holding fast to perverse views and the affectional defilement of indulgence in passion. That the deluded mind and consciousness arise from the permeation of ignorance is something that ordinary men cannot understand. The followers of the Hinayana, with their wisdom, likewise fail to realize this. Those Bodhisattvas who, having advanced from the first stage of correct faith by setting the mind upon enlightenment through practicing contemplation, have come to realize the Dharmakaya, can partially comprehend this. Yet even those who have reached the final stage of Bodhisattvahood cannot fully comprehend this. Only the enlightened ones have thorough comprehension of it. Why? The mind, though pure in its self-nature from the beginning, is accompanied by ignorance. Being defiled by ignorance, a defiled state of mind comes into being. But, though defiled, the mind itself is eternal and immutable. Only the enlightened ones are able to understand what this means. What is called the essential nature of mind is always beyond thoughts. It is, therefore, defined as immutable. When the one world of reality is yet to be realized, the mind is mutable and is not in perfect unity with suchness. Suddenly, a deluded thought arises. This state is called ignorance.
C. Defiled states of mind. 6 kinds of defiled states of mind conditioned by ignorance can be identified. The first is the defilement united with attachment to atman, from which those who have attained liberation in Hinayana and those bodhisattvas at the stage of establishment of faith are free. The second is the defilement united with the continuing mind, from which those who are at the stage of establishment of faith, and who are practicing expedient means to attain enlightenment can gradually free themselves and free themselves completely at the stage of pure-heartedness. The third is the defilement united with the discriminating, analytical mind, from which those at the stage of observing precepts begin to be liberated and finally are liberated completely when they arrive at the stage of expedient means without any trace. The fourth is the subtle defilement disunited from the represented world of objects, from which those at the stage of freedom from the world of objects can be freed. The fifth is the subtler defilement disunited from the evolving mind that perceives, i.e., the defilement existing prior to the act of perceiving, from which those at the stage of freedom from evolving mind are freed. The sixth and most subtle is the defilement disunited from the basic, activating mind, from which those bodhisattvas who have passed the final stage and have gone into the stage of Tathagatahood are freed.
D. Comments on the terms used in the foregoing discussion. On the expression, the one world of reality is yet to be realized, from this state those bodhisattvas who have advanced from the stage of the establishment of faith to the stage of pure-heartedness, after having completed and severed their deluded thoughts, will be more and more liberated as they advance, and when they reach the stage of Tathagatahood, they will be completely liberated. On united, by the word united appearing in the first 3 defilements is meant that though difference, i.e., duality, exists between the mind and the datum of the mind, there is a simultaneous relation between them in that when the subject is defiled the object is also defiled, and when the subject is purified the object is also purified. On disunited, by the word disunited is meant that the second 3 subtle and fundamental defilements are the aspects of non-enlightenment on the part of the mind existing prior to the differentiation into the subject and object relationship. Therefore, a simultaneous relation between the subject and object is not as yet established. On the expression defiled state of mind, it is called the hindrance originating from defilements, for it obstructs any fundamental insight into suchness. On ignorance, ignorance is called the hindrance originating from misconceptions of objects, for it obstructs the wisdom that functions spontaneously in the world. Because of the defiled state of mind, there emerges the subject that perceives, incorrectly, i.e., the evolving mind, and that which reproduces, the reproducing mind, and thus one erroneously predicates the world of objects and causes oneself to deviate from the undifferentiated state of suchness. Though all things are always in quiescence and devoid of any marks of rising, because of the non-enlightenment due to ignorance, one erroneously strays from the Dharma, i.e., suchness, thus one fails to obtain the wisdom that functions spontaneously by